I stood at the altar in a dress I'd saved 2 years to buy, watching the man I thought I loved look at me like I was something he'd stepped in. "I can't do this," Henry said, his voice carrying through the chapel. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but you're not what I thought you were," the guests whispered. Someone coughed. My mother's hand flew to her mouth in the third row. I felt my face burning, the lace at my collar suddenly too tight, suffocating. The flowers in my bouquet, white roses I'd picked myself, seemed to wilt in my trembling hands. "What do you mean?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Henry glanced at his parents, then back at me. His jaw was set, his eyes cold. "You're poor, Rachel. I didn't realize how poor until my mother showed me where you really live. That neighborhood, that apartment." He said it like the words tasted bad. "I can't marry someone from that world. I just can't." The church went silent. Even the organ seemed to hold its breath. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and frantic, drowning out everything else. I don't remember leaving. I remember my sister catching me in the parking lot, her arms around me while I shook. I remember the sound of car doors slamming, engines starting, people leaving without looking back. I remember thinking that humiliation has a sound. It's the rustle of 200 people pretending they didn't just watch you get destroyed. That night, alone in my tiny apartment, I stared at the dress hanging on the back of my door, white lace that had cost me $400, nearly a month's wages. I made myself a promise through tears that wouldn't stop falling. Someday, somehow, Henry would regret this. Not because I wanted revenge exactly, but because I needed to prove, if only to myself, that I was worth more than he'd made me feel. I needed to believe I was worth something at all. I'd grown up in a neighborhood where dreams came with disclaimers. The kind of place where police sirens were background noise and corner stores had bulletproof glass. My mother cleaned houses for families who never learned her name. My father had left when I was 7, and I barely remembered his face, just the smell of cigarette smoke and the sound of the door closing for the last time. I worked as a receptionist at a dentist's office, answering phones and filing insurance claims. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but I was good at stretching dollars. I knew which grocery stores had the best discounts on Wednesdays. I knew how to make a chicken last for 5 meals. I knew how to smile and pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Henry had seemed like a miracle when we met. He was charming, educated, from a family that summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. He told me my background didn't matter, that he loved me for who I was, not where I came from. I'd believed him. God. I'd believed every word. The morning after the wedding that wasn't, I woke up on my sister Maria's couch with mascara stains on her throw pillows. My phone had 37 missed calls. Most were from people who'd been at the church, friends, co-workers, distant relatives, all wanting to know if I was okay. I ignored all of them except one, from my boss, telling me to take the week off, like I needed permission to fall apart. Maria brought me coffee in a chipped mug. "You're better than him," she said. "I know, but knowing something and feeling it are different countries, and I was stuck at the border with no passport. I spent 3 days in sweatpants, eating ice cream and watching terrible reality TV. On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower, to put on real clothes, to stop crying. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at a stack of unopened bills, when there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, an older man stood there in an expensive suit that somehow looked wrong on him, like he was more comfortable in jeans. His hair was silver, his face weathered by sun and time. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. "Rachel Torres?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is George Calloway. I have a business proposition for you." I almost laughed. Almost slammed the door in his face. "I'm not interested in whatever." $1 million, he said, "to marry my son." The hallway seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the door frame, the wood rough under my palm. "I'm sorry, what?" George stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know what happened to you. I know Henry Westbrook humiliated you in front of everyone at that church, and I'm offering you a way to never worry about money again." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But it's not free money, Miss Torres. You'll earn every penny." I should have closed the door, should have called the police. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, made me ask, "How did you find me?" "I have connections, and I've been looking for someone like you." He pulled out a business card. "I own a cattle ranch about 2 hours from here, 3,000 acres. My son lives there, and he's He's a problem I need help solving. What kind of problem? The kind that thinks the world owes him something. The kind that's never worked a real day in his life. George's expression hardened. I need someone to teach him what real life looks like. Someone who's had to fight for everything. Someone like you. And you want me to marry him for this? 6 months. That's all I'm asking. 6 months living on the ranch, working alongside him, showing him what it means to struggle and survive. George met my eyes. After that, you can divorce quietly, walk away with $1 million, and never see any of us again. I thought about my mother's arthritis, how she pushed through the pain every day to scrub other people's toilets. I thought about Maria's kids wearing shoes with holes because she couldn't afford new ones. I thought about the church, the whispers, Henry's disgusted face. I need to think about it, I said. George nodded. You have 24 hours. Then the offer disappears. I called Maria that night, told her everything. That's insane, she said. This guy is clearly insane. Probably. But $1 million, Rachel. That's life-changing money. I know. She was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked around my apartment. The peeling paint, the radiator that only worked half the time, the window that wouldn't quite close. I thought about going back to work, facing the pitying looks and whispered conversations. I thought about running into Henry someday. Still poor, still stuck. I'm going to say yes, I said. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. George picked me up the next morning in a dusty pickup truck that smelled like leather and hay. We drove in silence for the first hour, the city falling away behind us, replaced by rolling hills and endless sky. The radio played old country songs about heartbreak and redemption. Tell me about your son, I said finally. George's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His name is Ethan. He's 28. His mother, my wife, died when he was 16. Cancer. His voice went rough. She was the kindest person I ever knew. Gentle, patient. She spoiled Ethan because she wanted to give him all the love she could before he trailed off. I'm sorry. After she died, I threw myself into work. Let Ethan do whatever he wanted. Gave him money, cars, anything to stop him from hurting. But I wasn't helping him. I was destroying him. George glanced at me. He's not a bad kid, Rachel. He's just lost. And I'm running out of time to help him find his way. Why me? I asked. Why not hire someone, I don't know, professional? Because you're real. You've been knocked down and gotten back up. You know what it's like to have nothing and fight for something. He paused. And because I saw the way you held your head up when you left that church, most people would have crumbled. You didn't. I didn't feel strong. But maybe that was the point. Maybe strength wasn't about not breaking. Maybe it was about breaking and choosing to keep going anyway. The ranch appeared through the truck window like something from another century. A sprawling house with a wraparound porch, barns painted red against the pale morning sky, fences stretching toward the horizon. Horses grazed in distant pastures. The air smelled like hay and earth and distance, so different from the exhaust fumes and garbage of the city. George pulled up to the main house, a beautiful structure of wood and stone that looked like it had been standing for generations. Ethan doesn't know you're coming, he said. I told him I found him a wife, and if he wants to keep his trust fund, he'll marry her and make it work for 6 months. That's coercive. That's parenting a 28-year-old who still acts like he's 16. George cut the engine. He'll hate you at first. Don't take it personally. He hates everything right now. Great pep talk. George almost smiled. You'll be fine. You're tougher than he is. The front door opened, and Ethan stepped out onto the porch. He was tall, over 6 feet, with messy dark hair and expensive sunglasses perched on his head. He wore designer jeans and a t-shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked at me like I was a piece of furniture being delivered to the wrong address. You've got to be kidding me, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. George climbed out of the truck slowly, like he was preparing for battle. Ethan, this is Rachel, your fiancée. My what? You heard me. The wedding is tomorrow morning. You'll live in the South cabin together, work the ranch together, and figure out how to be decent human beings together. George's voice hardened. Or you can leave right now with nothing but the clothes on your back and whatever pride you have left. Your choice. Ethan stared at his father, then at me, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too bitter to spit out. Finally, he laughed. sharp and angry. "This is insane. You can't do this." "I just did. I'll sue you. With what money?" George stepped closer. "Every dollar you have came from me. The car you drive, the credit cards in your wallet, the roof over your head, all mine. So here's how it's going to work. You marry Rachel. You work the ranch for 6 months. You learn what real life looks like. And at the end, if you've actually grown up, you get your trust fund. And if I refuse, then you walk away with nothing, and I leave everything to charity when I die." The color drained from Ethan's face. "You wouldn't. Try me." They stared at each other, father and son locked in a battle of wills that had probably been building for years. Finally, Ethan turned his gaze to me. "What's your story? How much is he paying you?" I lifted my chin. "Enough. So you're a gold digger. And you're a spoiled brat. Looks like we're even." George made a sound that might have been a laugh. Ethan's expression darkened, but before he could respond, George cut in. "Enough. Rachel, let me show you to the cabin." The south cabin sat about half a mile from the main house, nestled among cottonwood trees that whispered in the breeze. It looked like it had been built by someone's great-grandfather. Rough wood planks, a crooked chimney, windows that rattled in their frames when the wind blew. Inside, there was one bedroom with a double bed, one bathroom with a shower that dripped, and a living room barely big enough for a worn leather couch and a wood stove. "It's not fancy," George said, "but it's solid, and it has everything you need." "It's fine," I said, and it was. I'd lived in worse. Ethan appeared in the doorway, carrying a duffel bag he'd thrown together. He looked around the cabin with barely concealed disgust. "This place doesn't even have Wi-Fi." "It has what matters," George said. "Running water, a roof, heat in winter. How am I supposed to live like a normal person? That's the point." George handed me a key. "Rachel gets the bedroom. Ethan, you take the couch." "Of course," Ethan muttered. "Why not?" George turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. There are rules. You work together, you eat meals together, you treat each other with respect." He looked at Ethan. "And no running to the main house to complain to me. You're adults. Figure it out." Then he left, and I was alone with a stranger who hated me, in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, bound by a deal I still wasn't sure was real. Ethan dropped his duffel bag on the floor. "I'll take the couch," he said flatly. I heard. We stood there in the silence, two strangers bound by desperation and money, neither of us willing to admit we'd made a terrible mistake. Outside, a bird called out, sharp and lonely. The sound seemed to echo in the space between us. "Look," I said finally, "I don't like this any more than you do, but we're stuck with each other for 6 months. We might as well try not to make each other miserable." Ethan crossed his arms. "You're getting paid to be here. I'm being blackmailed. You could leave?" I could. He met my eyes. "But I won't, because I'm not going to let him win. Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are." He grabbed his bag and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on, pipes groaning in protest. I sat on the edge of the couch and tried not to think about what I'd gotten myself into. This was going to be a very long 6 months. The wedding was nothing like the one I'd almost had. We stood in George's living room at 8 in the morning with a justice of the peace and 2 ranch hands as witnesses. The room smelled like coffee and old wood. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. Ethan wore jeans and a button-down shirt he hadn't bothered to iron. I wore a simple blue dress Maria had lent me. Cotton. Comfortable. Nothing like the lace confection I'd worn to marry Henry. This dress didn't have dreams sewn into it. It was just fabric. The justice of the peace was an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She read through the vows efficiently, like she was checking off items on a grocery list. "Do you, Ethan Calloway, take Rachel Torres to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I do." "And do you, Rachel Torres, take Ethan Calloway to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I thought about Henry, about the church, about the girl I'd been just weeks ago. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife." She closed her book. "You may kiss the bride." Ethan looked at me with something between resignation and defiance. He leaned in, pressed his lips to mine for exactly 1 second, then pulled away. It felt like signing a contract, not sealing a marriage. The whole thing took 11 minutes. Afterward, George handed us each a glass of champagne. The ranch hands, an older man named Buck and a younger guy called Jesse, congratulated us with the enthusiasm of people attending a funeral. We drank the champagne in awkward silence. George raised his glass one more time. To new beginnings, and to learning what really matters. Ethan drained his glass without responding. I wondered if he could taste the bitterness, or if he'd learned to swallow it down long ago. George handed me a folder after the champagne was gone. Your work schedules. You both start tomorrow at 5 a.m. 5? Ethan's face went pale. In the morning? That's when ranchers work. George turned to me. Rachel, you'll start in the vegetable garden and the chicken coop. Ethan, you're on stable duty. Mucking stalls, feeding horses, general maintenance. I don't know how to do any of that, Ethan said. Then you'll learn. George's tone left no room for argument. Buck and Jesse will show you the ropes for the first few days. After that, you're on your own. We walked back to the cabin in silence. The sun climbing higher in the sky, heat beginning to press down on everything. I could feel Ethan's resentment radiating off him like waves. Inside the cabin, he threw himself onto the couch. This is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He looked at me. What's your real story? And don't give me some vague answer about needing money. Everyone needs money. Why did you actually say yes? I could have lied, could have kept it surface level. But something about the way he asked, like he actually wanted to know, made me tell the truth. A few weeks ago, I was supposed to get married, I said. His name was Henry. He came from money, and I didn't. On our wedding day, he called it off in front of everyone because he decided I wasn't good enough. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. That's harsh. It was humiliating. I sat in the rocking chair by the window. Your father found me 3 days later and offered me a way to never feel that powerless again. So I took it. Revenge? Survival, I corrected. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment, processing. For what it's worth, that guy sounds like an idiot. He was. But I was an idiot too for believing him. So we're both here because of our terrible life choices. Looks that way. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Well, at least we have that in common. The first week was a war fought in silence and exhaustion. George pounded on the cabin door at 4:45 a.m. every morning, and we dragged ourselves out of bed in the darkness. I learned quickly that ranch work doesn't care about your feelings. The chickens needed feeding whether you were tired or not. The vegetables needed watering whether your hands were blistered or not. My body, accustomed to sitting at a desk all day, rebelled. My back ached. My shoulders screamed. My hands, soft from years of typing and filing, cracked and bled. But I'd done hard labor before, helping my mother clean houses on weekends, working retail during the holidays, and I knew how to push through. Ethan, on the other hand, complained constantly. This is slavery, he muttered on the third morning, throwing a shovel down in the stable. Actual slavery. You're getting a trust fund out of it, I said, hauling a bucket of water to the horses. Slaves didn't get trust funds. He glared at me. You're getting $1 million to pretend to be my wife. Forgive me if I don't find you morally superior. It stung because he was right. We were both here for money. We were both playing roles, but at least I was trying to make the best of it. Buck, the older ranch hand, took pity on me around day 4. He was in his 60s, weathered and lean, with hands that had done decades of hard work. He found me behind the chicken coop, trying not to cry from frustration. First week is always the hardest, he said, handing me a pair of work gloves. Your body's learning. Give it time. Does it get easier? Nope, you just get tougher. He nodded toward the main house. George is a hard man, but he's fair, and he wouldn't have brought you here if he didn't think you could handle it. What about Ethan? Buck scratched his jaw. That boy's been lost for a long time. His mama dying broke something in him. And George, well, George handled it wrong. But he's trying to fix it now. Do you think it'll work? Depends on whether Ethan wants to be fixed. We worked in silence for a while, Buck showing me how to properly gather eggs without upsetting the hens. When we finished, he said, You got grit, girl. More than most people who show up here. Don't let that boy's attitude break you down. I promised I wouldn't. But that night, alone in the cabin with Ethan sulking on the couch, I wondered if I'd made a promise I couldn't keep. One afternoon during the second week, George found me sitting on the cabin porch, bandaging a cut on my hand from a barbed wire fence. Blood had soaked through the first bandage. The cut was deeper than I'd thought. He sat beside me without asking, pulling a jar of homemade salve from his pocket. "Let me see." I unwrapped the bandage. The cut ran across my palm, angry and red. George applied the salve gently. It smelled like herbs and something sharp, then rewrapped it with practiced efficiency. "Thank you," I said. "How's it going?" he asked. "And I want the truth, not the polite version." I considered lying, considered telling him everything was fine, but the truth came out instead. It's hard. The work is hard. Living with someone who resents my existence is hard. Pretending this is normal is hard. I know. Then why did you do this? Why put us both through it? George stared out at the pasture, where horses grazed in the golden afternoon light. When my wife was dying, she made me promise something. She said, "Don't let our son waste his life. Don't let him become someone who doesn't understand what really matters." I promised her I wouldn't. He looked at me. But for 12 years, I broke that promise. I let Ethan drift. And now he's almost 30, and he doesn't know how to be a functioning human being. "So, you forced him into arranged labor marriage?" George smiled grimly. "When you put it that way, it sounds insane. Because it is. Maybe. But desperate times. Desperate measures." He stood, joints creaking. "He'll come around, Rachel. He's stubborn, but he's not stupid. And I'm betting on you to show him what real character looks like. What if I can't? Then you'll still get your money. But I don't think you're the type to give up easily." After he left, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped lower, painting everything orange and gold. In the distance, I could see Ethan in the stable, moving slowly through his chores. He looked exhausted, defeated, nothing like the arrogant rich kid who'd sneered at me on that first day. Maybe we were both being broken down to be built back up. Or maybe we were just being broken. I wasn't sure yet. The shift started small, almost imperceptible. It was the 3rd week, and we were hauling 50-pound feed bags from the truck to the barn. The work was mindless, repetitive, the kind of thing that gave you too much time to think. Ethan had been sullen all morning, dragging his feet, doing the bare minimum. Then one of the bags split as he tried to lift it, grain spilling everywhere across the dirt. "Damn it!" He kicked the bag, then immediately winced. This is such a waste of time. I was already kneeling, scooping the grain back into what was left of the bag with my hands. Then help me fix it instead of making it worse. "Why do you even care? You're just here for the money, same as me." I looked up at him, sweat dripping down my face, hands covered in dust and grain. "Yeah, I am. But that doesn't mean I have to act like the world owes me something. It doesn't mean I can't take pride in doing the work right." He flinched like I'd slapped him. For a second, I thought he was going to snap back, say something cutting. Instead, he knelt down beside me and started helping. We worked in silence, our hands brushing occasionally as we scooped, the morning sun beating down on our backs. When we finished, he wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being an ass. For taking this out on you." He met my eyes. "This whole situation is messed up. But you're not the enemy. You're stuck here like I am." It wasn't much, but it was the first real thing he'd said to me since we'd met. "Apology accepted," I said. We finished loading the feed in a different kind of silence. Not hostile, but not exactly comfortable either. It was the silence of two people who'd agreed to stop fighting, even if they hadn't quite figured out how to be friends. That night, Ethan actually asked me how my day was over dinner, and I actually told him. It was small, but it was something. After that, the ice began to thaw piece by piece. Ethan started waking up on his own instead of waiting for George to pound on the door. He showed up to work on time. He even cracked the occasional joke, self-deprecating humor about his complete lack of practical skills. "I just spent 20 minutes trying to fix a fence post," he said one evening, collapsing onto the porch. Buck finally took pity on me and showed me I was literally hammering it backwards. I laughed. Actually laughed. How do you hammer something backwards? I don't know, but I managed it. We fell into a rhythm. Mornings feeding the animals, the air cold and sharp, our breath visible in clouds. Afternoons mending fences or working the garden, the sun relentless overhead. Evenings too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the porch with the cold beers George left in the cabin fridge every few days. One night, as the sun dipped below the hills and turned the sky orange and pink and purple, Ethan said, I don't think I've ever worked this hard in my life. It shows. He laughed, the sound genuine. That's fair. He took a sip of his beer, condensation dripping down the bottle. Can I ask you something? Sure. What made you say yes to all this? I mean, I know the money, but there had to be easier ways to make $1 million. I watched the sky change colors, the light softening everything it touched, making even the rough edges of the ranch look gentle. I told you about Henry, about the wedding. Yeah, what I didn't tell you was how it felt. I chose my words carefully. Standing there in front of everyone, having someone look at you like you're trash they need to dispose of. It breaks something inside you. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Ethan was quiet, listening. Your dad offered me a way to never feel that small again. To prove, to myself, mostly, that I was worth more than Henry thought, that I could survive something hard and come out stronger. I paused. So when he offered me this insane deal, I said yes. Because staying in my apartment, going back to my job, running into Henry someday, still poor and still stuck, that felt like dying slowly. This felt like fighting back. Ethan nodded slowly, like he was turning the words over in his mind, examining them from all angles. I've been a spoiled brat my whole life, haven't I? Yeah, I said. But you're getting better. You think so? I wouldn't still be here if I didn't. He smiled. Not the bitter, angry expression I'd seen before, but something softer, something real. For what it's worth, Henry was an idiot. Anyone who'd treat you like that doesn't deserve you. Thanks. We sat in comfortable silence as the stars began appearing one by one, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt something other than exhaustion and doubt. I felt hope.